are on at this point is to consider any requests for the school district relative to 2019-2020 crossing guards. And Rebecca, the memo doesn't necessarily address the two main points, but there are two motions. Do you want to consider?
Sure, the memo doesn't address the, I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
Oh, there's two motions for this one, correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
There's two options in terms of how, the board, in terms of direction for the board to provide, or any other suggestion that you'd have. But included in the packet, what we tried to do is just detail the events leading up till now. We did have a discussion on the crossing guard contract before releasing the last RFP. And at that time, the board had moved to only approve a one-year contract so that we could come back and have some revisited conversation with the school district. So those points are covered for purposes of tonight. It is at least my hope that you continue to request the school district to pay for half of the crossing guard contract moving forward in the 2019-2020 school year. And as a part of the last conversation, there was also discussion as to who should hold the crossing guard contract, whether that be the village or the school district. And so I didn't know if that was additional clarification that the board was willing to provide. Please note that we are scheduled tomorrow to review the RFP. Chief Nimmer and myself and Superintendent Davis to review the RFP for crossing guard services. The one that we had last year in preparation for this process.
And just for clarification, so tonight you're only asking us about the cost share component, or suggest recommendations from yourself, and then the who holds the contract. You're not asking us to select a vendor?
No.
Because you have not done the RFP.
Correct.
Okay, and when you come back, I guess, it notes $25 per hour, and just what goes to actually the crossing guard, and we have that discussion, so once that comes back to us, you'll identify that for us?
Sure. Yes. Yes, and that is actually within the draft RFP right now. Once we separate it out.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on this? Trustee Renner.
I'll move to request the school district pay for half of the crossing guard contract in addition to the full cost of intersection specifically requested by the district Shorewood and Oakland beginning with the 2019-2020 school year.
And do you want to address the second one in the motion, or do you want to just keep them separate?
Let's keep them separate.
Okay. I will second that. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. So the next, if we want to provide direction, the second thing to talk about is just who would hold the contract.
I mean, I think the police department oversees them. So I guess I could see it either way.
I just know we had a discussion on this, so I just want to make sure that it was
I mean, we can go off the RFP and have that discussion later, but I think the police department it's kind of their service area, kind of their expertise. I think.
Just as a refresher, we can discuss this as Trustee Mara said. I believe it was Trustee Carpenter in the discussion last time we talked about this, and maybe it was during budget, but had mentioned that because the school district has the constituents who would complain or not complain, or usually about the crossing guards, I just remember that discussion, and she, I think it was her. So we can wait to have that discussion when she's back. Okay, so I think that completes that item. Is that correct? All right. We will now move on to items, reports of village officials. I just want to mention that tomorrow's election day, and wish everybody luck that's in as a candidate this year. I'm really proud of all the debates that happened, and I feel like we're going to have a great election season. So thank you. Hopefully everyone will go out and vote if they already have not voted. And a reminder that our poll location for the Lake Bluff, what ones are that? What words is it?
9 through 12.
9 through 12 has moved from the Lake Bluff Elementary to the church, and there will be a flag display for state statute, correct? Okay. And then there's proclamation, it's just in your packet, so you know for Arbor Day. And I believe that is it for my reporting. Any village trustee that has a report?
There's also a handout on your desk on the employee breakfast on Friday, April 12th.
Oh, yeah.
It's just coming up. No RSVP needed, it's good.
Does it come?
Is that employee appreciation?
No, just an employee breakfast. The appreciation is different, setting at public park. But please come, we welcome you to come.
Great. If there's no others, is
Oh, I
there?
have one.
Oh, yep, trustee Buffers.
So I had the great pleasure of meeting a bunch of individuals from Menlo Boulevard and the surrounding areas over the last couple of weeks, and got a lot of great feedback regarding our decision not to dump snow over there, and got to witness, of course, firsthand, because we've had a lot of great days, children picnicking and not just children, people picnicking, playing football, using that community space. So I was asked to just thank the board for not dumping the snow over in that area where so many people use it.
Great, thank you. Anything further?
Oh, I do have another report. So we just had two discussions in committee tonight. One on reducing the fine to $1 or thereabouts. For marijuana, we seem to have some good traction, so hopefully next time we'll have maybe a little bit more time and be able to tidy that up. And then we also had a rather large base of individuals who came out for the conversion therapy ban that we're discussing, the ordinance, and including people from the city of Milwaukee, other organizations, Reverend from, I forget which church, but it was, so a lot of really good discussion on why, you know, the broader community would love to see Shorewood also adopt an ordinance like 4 of our neighbors in Wisconsin.
Okay, thank you so much. Rebecca? Anything? Okay, items for future consideration. There is one that was listed by our village manager because multiple village board members received the email and was interested in seeing this as a further discussion item. Do you want to state what, we kind of already heard what it was. So, I'm all in favor. I'd like to make a motion to consider a policy on Airbnb.
I'll second it.
Yes.
Just a question, is that also should refer to the Community and Business Relations Committee for further research and recommendation?
I prefer not to assign it to committee at full
Oh.
board, but
Oh, okay.
we can.
In the past, we had talked about, we did it.
Yeah.
Yep.
We thought that would be.
In fact, you assigned something in my committee, in her committee, in the last meeting.
Okay. So,
You want to restate it?
no,
So, could you restate it to me?
I'd like to make a motion
Please.
to consider a policy on Airbnb. Any further discussion? Yes.
That's something I'd rather have go to the committee and have a committee, work on it and come
Yeah,
back. I
I
don't
will.
want to discuss that in full board.
I totally agree.
I would
Any
make
new-
a motion to amend the motion to assign
Well-
community business relations.
There's no second yet,
Oh,
so there's nothing to amend,
not
sorry.
for- Okay.
There was a second, it was trustee Maher.
What? Oh, I did.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can
So
amend
I
it,
would
sorry.
amend the motion.
I'll second the amendment.
Okay,
So it's,
so we have an amendment on the floor. I see that, it will be stated before we vote.
okay.
I guess just a point of clarification, because I presume that I'll be the staff person working on this. So you're looking at revising current regulations pertaining to it, or perhaps clarifying enforcement procedures? It sounds like over the past week or so, in working with our village attorney, that we could potentially seek enforcement of this particular problem based on some confirmation of evidence of what we can do. So just going on my department's mission of complaint-based enforcement, we have definitely received a complaint about this, and we've received multiple complaints over the years. So aside from the direction to work on a policy, as an update, I will work with Attorney Bayer on potentially seeing that complaint through the system. So I think that, whether or not you need to give me direction on that, I don't know. But then in terms of the direction on the policy, I guess the question would be to clarify whether or not, and this could be at either committee or whoever gets assigned to, what portions of the regulations you want to have revised. And so I guess there's two components. Enforcement, I will proceed with accordingly. The policy, I'll bring to whatever body wants it. I can summarize what our current regulations are and whether or not.
Do we already have an ordinance on this? Is that what you're saying?
So the zoning code, just as a quick update, the zoning code prohibits tourist rooming houses in residential districts. And it does require a license to the health department. The issue is the state statutes were modified in 2017 to prohibit local municipalities from enforcing that under certain circumstances. So if the stay is a certain time period, we can't enforce that prohibition. So the question has always been in my department of how do we prove who's staying under what terms for what length. And so other communities have gone further and allowed them with whether it's a permit, or Madison, I think I linked to, change their zoning code to have 7 or 8 things in there that would allow it, which helps with enforcement. It still is a lot of chasing. And under the current system, like I said, I'm more in a complaint-based thing, because I can tell you, any of us can go on Airbnb right now and find that there's multiple of these listings in the village. I've only gotten complaints over this one, and so that's why it hasn't really risen to the level of larger policy discussion at this point.
So by going on that site, can you enforce that? Say, oh, well, here's a listing.
It depends, I mean, part of the problem is if it's between 7 and 29, if there's rental periods between 7 and 29 days, what you can do is you can limit in any 365-day period, 180 days, the total rentals. But the state statute totally usurps local zoning on that point. You can't overturn the statute. And so on shorter term rentals, everybody is still supposed to have a license from the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. If it's anybody that's going to rent for more than 10 nights during a 12-month period. But what people are getting savvy, and they're saying, well, even if they're going to rent it for 3 days over a weekend, they'll get posted at 7 days. And then, they're only going to stay there for the weekend, and just charge whatever it was going to be for 3 days to get around. So it'll look like it's being rented for 7 days, even if they leave on Monday. That's one way, but people are getting savvy on that too, because if the municipality is saying, well, you have to tell us what day to trigger the 365-day time period, because it's 180-day max between there. So some of them are going this route and getting licensed for tourist homes below that. But I think the issue is we've got to make sure that they're licensed. But that's more of a enforcement issue through the health department than it is really involving the village. So there's a lot of moving parts in here, and I think we had talked about possibly issuing citations if we can, for the way we can.
So can I ask this? So that's what I figured. We're not changing the ordinance. So the policy, though, as a policy statement, the village can still, through a policy, state we would like enforced. And as you were saying, here are some methods to prove, because you can't usurp what the state statute said. Our code prohibits it no matter what we do. We have to follow state statute. But the policy can give direction on the intent of enforcement and our feelings as a village board. Is that correct?
Well, I think, here's how it works now. Under the zoning, it just says that tourist homes are prohibited. That's technically not true anymore under the state statute, but if you interpret it in a way that if you interpret it consistent with state law, we can still regulate these shorter term rentals, or say that the maximum you can have in a 365-day period is 6 months. So we can do that, and I think it's fair and reasonable to interpret the prohibition on tourist homes to be consistent with the current state statute and interpret it in that framework. So if we issued citations or if we issued corrective orders within those parameters.
Clarify anything. That's all I'm asking.
But you may want to change the ordinance though. You may want, you you may, as a policy, decide that either we love rentals and we don't want to put any bar on them at all, the more the merrier, or on the flip side of that, there's got to be some balance and we want to regulate it in a different way, in a more direct way, rather than saying, well, because tourist homes are prohibited under the zoning, we're gonna, so you may want to do it in a more explicit way that lays it out for residents, because, even 5 or 10 years ago, these Airbnbs really didn't exist. So it's technology changing, regulation, technology moving faster than the regulation.
Is your recommendation that you would change the ordinance in any way?
Well, really,
Just trying to figure out how
yeah,
to delegate this down to committee.
that's really gonna be a policy decision. If you say, hey, we think these are great, and we're just gonna try to, we have a few bad apples that are, and we're okay with that, that's a policy decision for the board. On the flip side, if you say, we wanna be as regulatory as we can under the state statute, we wanna be as strictly regulating under the state statute, that's another policy decision. So once a policy decision is made, then I think that then you decide, do we amend the ordinance? And I think that it behooves the board, to whatever decision it makes, to be transparent to homeowners so that they understand what the regulatory framework is.
Trustee Warren, thank you.
Sorry, trying to simplify this down just a little bit. I think we have kind of two things going on here. First, kind of pursuing enforcement. We have a complaint and pursuing enforcement based on that complaint. And on the flip side, I think looking at our policy and deciding whether we want to amend the ordinance. So I think there are probably two things. If we go down the committee, we look at this, but I think this piece is already in process. The enforcement complaint piece is already in process. And then, as kind of a further step, maybe taking it down to committee to look at a policy and then be bumped down to whether we want to change our ordinance.
Okay, I think that's how the amendment was framed.
I mean, I think
Trustee Amenta, and then
yeah, I mean, the issues with noise and garbage and partying, and we have hours that things have to end by. I mean, I think, I don't know that we can have the police go there and knock on the door and say, when did you get here and when are you leaving? I mean, that might be a little bit of an overreach for the police, but I think certainly, noise issues and those things that are legitimate nuisances. I mean, that's another thing that occurred to me too is, could we somehow get the property designated as nuisance property? I don't know what we have in the ordinance as that, but I mean, if there's enough neighbor complaints and we can, and there's things like garbage or it's not tended or the grass isn't cut or it's falling apart, we might be able to deal with it through that. But I mean, I think generally speaking, we should encourage whatever enforcement we can possibly do at this point, and I think we need to refer the whole ball of wax to Steve and our committee to come up with some recommendations.
Because to that point, I mentioned I have advised people if they have legitimate noise or parking complaints, basically things to call the police to document it, so that I have something to enforce. That's a great question in terms of how much you want them to be actively searching for these things or need to be searching for these things.
But
At this
again,
point, it's only been complaint based on this one
We're
property.
going outside.
That's what I was
We're
gonna
way
say
out
here.
of the
of the
So-
agenda.
So I was just gonna say that basically, I think those things can, if we're delegating this to committee, that's where it's decided. Otherwise, we need to agenda that specific complaint. So you have laws in front of you, you're gonna enforce as much as you can at this moment, until a new policy is made. And if we wanna talk about the specific complaint, we can agenda-size it through April 15th. So with that, can you read back the amendment?
The amended motion is to move for consideration of policy on Airbnb and direct the policy to Community and Business Relations Committee.
All right, there was a motion and a second, any
But
further
it's
discussion?
really Airbnb or just short-term rental. I mean, Airbnb is a company, it's,
Right.
I mean, they're going
Do you want a friendly amendment? for your
short-term,
amendment?
yeah, I would say term
Yeah,
is short-term rentals.
Trustee Menta, are you okay with that friendly amendment?
Is the rest of the
So,
board okay with that?
Because you seconded it.
Oh,
The
yeah.
whole board has to be okay with it.
And then
Fine, Robert's rules. Everyone's okay?
Good with that.
Okay, so, any further discussion?
I presume that's at the next meeting. I'm just trying to gauge
As long as,
the
yeah.
importance of this versus other priorities.
Now, are we gonna specify time now in motions? We can.
Maybe you don't have to, it will take me some time to do do this, and I was just trying to gauge the level of.
I think Rebecca
Importance.
probably could gauge that the best, as
Yeah.
long as you have enough time to get
That's
that
fine, I
right.
can work with.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. All right, so any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. And now we will vote on the amended motion.
Do you want me to read it one more time, or all
I
okay?
think we're okay. Okay, any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. And at this point, I think we can adjourn if we have a
Move to
motion.
adjourn.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Have a wonderful election night.